Us this morning. I'd like to welcome Mr. Femi Shegun, a former diplomat. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
As well as Dr. Iwanyawu, who is founder, Leadership Watch.
Good morning.
Thank you both for coming. Well, if our focus is in attracting foreign investment to Nigeria, you will recall that at this moment, our president is in China with a very powerful team indeed, including Mrs. Folorenshaw and...
he's on his way back if he's not already here.
Yeah, I'm sure he should be. He's back.
Well, okay, they spent a few days in China having
Yes.
those powerful meetings. In fact, our president is supposed to have met the president of China. What are your thoughts about this focus of our foreign policy at the moment in light of all the things that you see going on in Nigeria? I'm not going to mention them, but you know the things I'm talking about. How far do you think this drive is going to go?
Well, the important thing is that we first of all have to situate Nigeria in the international environment. And the international environment is anarchic in nature because all nations are equal. And because all nations are equal, the United Nations and its precursors were set up to ensure that peoples and nations adhered to certain rules and regulations. And in the case of the United Nations General Assembly, to which Nigeria is a signatory, and so many other nations are signatories, we have generally all adhered to the resolutions passed by them. But we find that there is a domination, and in these days of what we call a flat world, a flat economic world, we discover that nations that are much more powerful in economic terms have greater leverage than other nations. You will recall that United Nations Security Council comprises five nations, has five permanent security. Has five permanent security seats, and China occupies one of those seats, which it took over from the Republic of China back when about I cannot recollect the year now, 1971, I think. Now, China has of late become the fastest growing economy in the world, and what it has done is that it has bucked the trend. Whereas in the past, the United States of America, after the end of the Cold War and the bipolar situation that used to exist, then became the only power in a unipolar world, and therefore began to dictate so much to the United Nations General Assemblies and its agencies. The China has sort of come up as a counterweight to the United States of America. And not only has China come up as a counterweight, it has begun to expand into Africa, which everybody now understands is the most investable region. It is rich in economic resources, untapped economic resources, and it is the most investable destination. So that apart, I think Nigeria probably had a very, very good start many years ago when Professor Bolaji Akinyemi was heading the Institute of International the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, and he advocated for the non-aligned summit. And we championed the non-aligned summit, and this was what really helped to position us well for where we are today. So today we have gone into China, and China has given more than $3 billion worth of investment into Africa, has promised, and I believe as of now we have tapped into approaching $2 billion worth right now. If you leave me to go on with all these details, he will not have any opportunity to say anything. So let me just stop at that.
Reverend, let me take you way back to the days of President Obasanjo. Remember, in his first term, he was hardly ever at home, traveling around looking for foreign investment. But people have said that unless we put our house in order, nobody of any great muscle is going to come and invest in Nigeria. We got no power, there's insecurity, and the list goes on and on and on. So how successful do you think that this, our focus, is going to be? Can we really achieve?
Yeah, definitely we can. Trying to compare this regime with that of Obasanjo, or what General Obasanjo did while he was president.
May I intervene here?
Yeah.
The word regime applies to military government.
Okay. Dispensation.
Thank you.
Would that be okay?
Yes.
All right.
Semantics.
Yes. Okay. That's all right. That's all right. So, under President Obasanjo, yes, Obasanjo was all the time traveling and, trying to get investors, so he claimed, to come into Nigeria. But at that point in time, I think he was particularly looking at wrong directions. He was focusing on America, focusing on Europe, and expecting that, these countries would come in and would do all the magic. Just like my friend has said, you see, it is about understanding, the way things are. The Europe, which many people before now have thought that have answered to our problems here in Africa, today they are going through their own challenges. America is also going through its own challenges, when it comes to economic matter. So as things stands today, China happens to be a much more viable country to deal with in terms of, pursuing an agenda for direct foreign investment. Because one, China has a very good policy. China has a very good policy that appeals to me. China would not give you money. China would look at the projects you want to carry out, and they will, mobilize the companies in their country that will be able to execute those projects. And, the Chinese government will guarantee to pay these companies. So they look at the cost, and these companies come to execute those projects. What that has simply done is that, you see, it saves us a whole lot of issues here back home, because the time when Nigeria collects loan, physical cash, and before you know it, this money gets into private pockets, and these projects are not executed. So what China is doing right now, I believe it is in our own interest. So if they send their companies to come here, help us develop our power sector, help us develop our aviation sector, and what have you. So, and again, they are not asking you to pay. Most of their loans is interest-free.
So, I'm sorry to interject here, and I really do not want to take away from the direction you were going, but I am tempted to ask this question. We know that American policy, foreign policy, is very clear. We can analyze, we can dissect, we can query, we can quiz it and do all kinds of things, but we know what it is to some extent, especially across the African continent and other parts of the world. What is Nigeria's foreign policy?
Alero in her introduction has said, under President Goodluck Jonathan, the focus is on how to attract direct foreign investment. And again, for me, I think it's really difficult to clearly define Nigerian foreign policy. And I don't even want to bother myself about it, because it is all...
It is not particularly clear to you.
It's not particularly clear to me.
Okay,
but I don't want to bother myself about it, because, the subject matter which we are discussing now, I'll be looking at it, what does Nigeria stand to benefit, from the
delegation.
delegation.
Could I assist?
I was going to ask that, Femi Segun
Yeah.
Schultz, what do you understand as our foreign policy?
Being a former diplomat.
Tracing the foreign policy of Nigeria, right from independence through the focus of Africa as the cornerstone and the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. Nigeria championed, led, and participated in so many interventions in post-colonial decolonization, and then, in fact, the international wars that happened in various countries and in regional, sub-regional, and then we even led the war, the challenge against apartheid, and in many countries we helped to them to achieve, like Namibia and Zimbabwe, to achieve independence.
So are we still following through that policy?
No, we have changed from that.
So where are we at in
right
terms of
now?
our policy
We are
now?
focusing on Nigeria as the centerpiece of our own foreign policy. We have moved from Africa because we have discovered since that most of our efforts have gone. I wouldn't say.
Thankless.
Well, I would say something like that, because a lot of the time when we have regional competitions for slots for representation at the world level, and we expected that those nations that we had spent so much money on, we had supported and given so much investment in men and in assets, did not support us. And I believe that Nigeria is now doing absolutely what is right, with Nigeria as the focus. And we have the economy as the focus of our policy, because it's no point calling ourselves or being called the giants of Africa, and we are unable to stand on our feet in the Community of Nations.
I am curious. How do we say we have a foreign policy that is focused on us?
Well, your foreign policy derives from your internal policy and the challenges that you face yourself. The ability to project your power and your requirements in the international arena is what is known as your foreign policy, and that is exactly what we are doing now. But we're doing it now with Nigeria as our focus. No longer are we championing the cause of so many other nations, even not within our own region. But we have a situation now, a situation where, whereas before the United States of America that generally tended to determine the direction of world politics through the United Nations General Assembly, the Bretton Woods institutions, and so on, the IMF, the International Court of Justice, tended to ignore Africa. But now that China is insidiously coming into Africa through its economic investment, we find that there is a new, should I say renewed, or a new interest?
Neocolonialism.
There's a new interest of the United States of America in Africa, because America knows that should China become a world power, in the sense that it dominates the whole of Africa and manages to corner all of Africa's resources, then America will cease to be, or at least there will be a serious erosion of its position as a